Okay, dear participants of our today's seminar, thank you very much for coming, even though it is the last, these are the last days of summer, and these days will be extremely intense in the laboratory because we are holding 3 seminars this week, and we start with our seminar, which we are going to hold together today with Tamara Shcheglova, but actually this is a joint work of a group of people working in the lab, a group of our members, and so we will tell a little bit more about this project. I want to say that this is the next seminar in the series of the seminars devoted to the theoretical and methodological innovations in the sphere of social network analysis. And if you came up with our seminar somehow suddenly and you didn't know that we have already conducted a series of these seminars, so you are very welcome to come to our YouTube channel and to find other presentations of our colleagues and also our invited speakers. So all the presentations are open and they already they can be found in YouTube. So please, you can go there and find something that you're interested in, because we have covered quite a lot of different topics devoted to innovations in network analysis, and we really find it very interesting. And today, me and Tamara, as I said, we are going to present the joint work of the group who are, besides us, Aruna Kim, Nadezhda Buzina, Vasilisa Vashchenko, Lika Kapustina, Stanislav Moiseyev, and also our former colleague and our student, Lev Tsipis. And this is the research project, which is titled as Patterns of Collaboration in the Russian Sociological Community, Structure of Scientific Schools and Possible Growth Points. And this project is implemented as a grant of the Russian Scientific Foundation from July 2022 till June 2023. So it was for 2 years. This project was aimed at the analysis of the structure and patterns of collaboration in the scientific community of Russian sociologists, where we understood collaboration as co-authorship of a scientific article, and we used a methodology which we use quite intensively in the lab. This is the methodology of bibliometric network analysis. We used data from eLibrary as the source of our information. So the time period which we cover is 2010-2021, so 12 years. And we tried to actually implement the methodology for the analysis of this Russian language data for the first time. And we think that this is quite a nice input of this project. But at the same time, of course, we also have results. And I think today is, let's say, the first time when we are presenting the results so openly. I think we will continue, and we will have also a series of seminars and some presentations devoted to this project a little bit later in September. But I'm really happy that today we already are able to share some of the results with you. So the schedule is the following. At first, I will give the floor to Tamara, who will talk about the research questions that we pose and also the methodological issues. And then we will come up to the results of our analysis, and I will continue with this with the presentation of the results that we obtained. So Tamara, now I will give the floor to you.
Thank you, Daria. I will try to cover this methodological part very shortly, because I think several seminars were devoted to this, and all the videos are available. so only main probably stages. And then the more time will be given to the results part. Okay. So starting with the relevance of this research, so why should we study the structure of scientific community of sociologists in Russia? Because the development process of sociological science in Russia and Soviet Union were not linear, because in pre-revolutionary period, for example, the sociology were developing in accordance with foreign sociology, so there was no any like internal directions of development. Then in mid 60s, 70s, the sociology grew out of the so-called factory research, that was sociology of labor, and there was some kind of absence of links with bourgeois science and some originality in the research. And in modern Russia, we can see the like kind of high level of centralization, like the most universities, the most of the scientists are located in Moscow and St. Petersburg, and they like conduct more researches and so on. And so we kind of question whether regional sociological school exist, how to communicate, do they connect to like capital communities like from Moscow and St. Petersburg, and how everything is like organized in this area. So some attempts to study this problem were made by group of Sokolov and Tsetaev, and they like described their research in their articles. They showed the existence of these kind of centralized groups, and so we also with our own approach investigated this area of research. So the aim of the study was to study the structure of collaboration in scientific community of Russian sociologists, and determine the structure that exists in this collaboration. Why it is important? Because understanding some structural, some patterns of connections, we can make some conclusions about the growth potential of sociology in Russia, how quickly it can be internationalized, if this is the correct word, and how competitive Russian scientists, Russian sociologists are on the international arena. And we posed several hypotheses. So the first one was that in the period of our study, so we can see that the more and more sociologists tend to work in groups. So the collaboration index will be growing. The share of works written in collaboration will be increased. The second hypothesis was that very short amount of authors have a high scientific activity, while the most authors do not have the high scientific activity. So this is a kind of called Matthew effect. And the third hypothesis was that in the structure of collaboration network, a lot of separate groups of researchers can be distinguished, because many like scientific groups work just, so they kind of closed, very fragmented. So that was our third hypothesis. And speaking about methodology, like Daria said, the methodology to analyze bibliometric data was developed by Bataguel, Anushka Ferligoi, and this group of Slovenian colleagues. However, when we need to analyze the data in Russian language, so we need to somehow adapt this methodology or create a new methodology, to work with local issues, and that's what we were doing. Yeah, so I can skip to next slide. So methodologies that were developed by our colleagues, like by Bataguel, Daria, Ferligoi, and others, they were based on Web of Science data source. And as analytical tools, they used Vostok-PyEC program that allows to create networks from Web of Science data, and PyEC program for implementing some analytical techniques to analyze these networks. So we also had to choose some bibliographic database, not Web of Science, because not all like articles in Russian are covered in these foreign databases. Then pick the tools and techniques for analysis. We decided to continue with PyEC. That's why we had to prepare all the data in the proper format. And we choose, so like I said, all these methodology techniques were already been covered by Daria in our previous seminar, so it is available on YouTube. And I will get back to the data. So we picked the eLibrary resource because it is the biggest, I guess, database of scientific literature in Russian, and it allows to filter, to sort the data in more ways than the others. Like we also considered Cyberleninka, but we decided that eLibrary gives more opportunities in that sense. So we picked eLibrary as the most representative one and collected in total 75,000 publications. We tried to collect at first all the available information. So we collect the metadata on publications, like its IDs, titles, number of pages, all these numbers like DOI and others. Then information about authors. If there was too many authors, we collected only the maximum of 8 authors of the publications, and also their IDs, the IDs of their affiliations. Then the metadata about journal, its name, its numbers, its impact factor, and so on, and keywords that were given to the articles, to the publications. So the rubric, the abstract, the code of the rubric. And this is how the data collection process looked. So we connect to the eLibrary API service. This is the process. Thanks a lot to Lika and Vasilisa and Lev, who helped us with this data collection. Then we got XML files and wrote a Python parser to extract the information that we were needed in the proper format. So here you can see how the structure of this XML file looked. And then we were in the stage of data preprocessing. That was a really big stage because the information, however, it was organized, but there was some issues with duplications, with missing data, like some authors' IDs, some affiliation IDs lacked their IDs. Yeah, there was 0 or none, and we were like dealing with the lack of available information and the problems with the problems of this data inconsistency. Some other examples of how what issues we were dealing with. For example, one author could have like different endings of their surname, for example, or as you can see here, Parma and Pirma, yeah, this is the same author with the same ID, but in one article it appears like with A, and in the other with U. So we need to identify these problems and to solve them. Partly we were doing it with code, like automatically, but some of like cases we were looking expertly and we were preparing this data, so it will be looked really nice and could be analyzed. So no duplications, no missings were in the data set. And after the data were prepared and clean and so on, we created networks. So at first, yeah, we have two-mode network of works and authors. And out of this network, we created the network of co-authorship, which means like the nodes are authors, and the connections of them between them is the number of works that they wrote together. So the loops of the node, like the connection of the node with itself, corresponds to the number of works that are available for this author in total. And other type of network that we created is the collaboration network, which considers the contribution of the author to their own work. Yeah, and third type of the network is collaboration network that considered the contribution of author only to the articles that written jointly with the others, like other authors. So yeah, we got these three networks, and we like came to the analysis at three stages. So micro level, meta level, and macro level. At the micro level, we calculated some metrics of importance, like the degree, out degree, to highlight the important nodes in the network. Then on the meta level, on the meta level, we identify some important subgroups, yeah, to find who collaborate mostly with each other. Yeah, we made this by islands approach and with line cut techniques. And on the macro level, we looked at the collaboration network as a whole, like which structure it has, like by using block modeling techniques and descriptive statistics, we described the like general characteristics of this collaboration. Yeah, and I guess now we come to the results. So Daria.
Yeah, now it is my turn. So let me also share my side of the presentation. Tamara, can you please?
You want me to start? Okay, so you.
Yeah, because it will be much
okay.
easier. Sorry. Let us start from the right place. Okay. So Tamara, thank you very much for this quite brief but essential introduction. Probably in some parts of the description of the results, I will repeat some things, and they will be more clear for those who hear about this analysis for the first time. So let's start from the results which we obtained for the macro level. Of course, here at first we would like to show you some descriptive statistics of the data set that we have. And it is very logically to start with the amounts of publications and authors which we have, because this is the essential information for the collaboration networks construction. So, as Tamara said, we have 75,000 of publications in our data set for this 12 years period. And we have 37,000 of authors who has written these publications. And on this slide, you can see the distribution of the number of publications for each year, and also the number of authors who published article in each year. And what is interesting is that since 2019, we can actually see that the amount of authors prevails over the number of publications. It can mean that actually the authors, there are more authors than publications, and that the level of collaboration is increasing in these recent years. And we will see it more precisely in the next slides. And also, let us notice that we have the majority of publications, the largest shares of publications and also authors in the years 2015-2016. And then we have a slight decrease. And of course, as we have lower numbers in 2020 and 2021, it can actually mean that the data is not indexed properly in eLibrary, and some recent papers didn't appear. But also we can look at the trend a little bit later, and we can also make some conclusions about this fact. So if there is any cause, any reason of this of the decrease of the number of publications. Now let's look at the temporal distribution of activity of authors. So actually here we have on the slide 12 periods, and we have the shares of unique authors who were active in a period. So we have 72% of authors who were active only in period 1, which means that they published an article only in 1 year of these 12 years of observation. Probably they published 2 articles or 3 articles, but they appeared just in 1 year, and then they didn't continue to publish. So this is quite an interesting observation, we think. And then we have also 12% of authors who appeared in 2 periods in these 12 years. However, we see some authors who are very stable and very productive, and they publish articles every year during this 12 years period, or almost every year. So we have 160 and 199 authors who were very active and who were publishing articles all the time. Now let's look at the number of publications by authors. And again, which is quite interesting and surprising, that the most authors have published just 1 article. So these are 66 of authors. You can see them here on the left. Or they published 13 more percent of authors published 2 articles during these 12 years. And we see that only about 6% of scientists who has 10 articles or more. So these are this light green group are the authors who are, again, quite productive. And we can also look at the logarithmic scale of the number of works and authors on the right. And actually, what we can say is that this distribution looks like it follows a bibliometric law, which is known as Lotka's law. And this is a kind of preferential attachment law, where we can see that the majority of authors are not productive, so they have like 1 or 2 or 3 publications, and at the same time there are some authors who would be very productive and who would have a lot of articles published. And this Lotka's law goes from bibliometric research, and actually we should, I would say that for the future we should actually check it, because it is possible to check it even with some formulas, but sorry, we didn't have time to do it till this presentation, but we will do it in future. But this line looks very like this power law distribution. And then we can also look at the author's contribution to publications, because as Tamara said, we constructed several types of collaboration networks. And one network, which is called CO network of co-authorship, it just counts the number of publications which 2 authors have with each other. But another network, which is called CN collaboration network, normalized network, it allows us to consider the contribution of authors to their own works and to works which are prepared in collaboration, so which are written jointly with someone else. And the logic is, if the author has a lot of collaboration, then his or her own input to the field will be lower, because he cannot give the same, because he or she gives a lower amount of time to the publication. And here we show the distribution of these 2 metrics, which are the number of works and the contribution to the field. So this contribution to the field varies from almost 0 to 120, and number of works varies from 1 to 2041. And it's interesting also to observe that the authors with the most papers, like 241 and so on, do not have the highest contribution to the field in the sociology. So we see them here on the right with this orange circle. So they do have a lot of works, but they're not necessarily given the most contribution to the field. While other authors who has less works, but still about 100 of works, 100, 150, they appear to give a higher contribution to the field, because they put more their own input into their works. Yeah, it happens because if the author has a lot of co-authors, then his or her own contribution kind of disappears. Let me just look at the question. Yeah, thank you, Artem. Yeah, the distribution of authors also looks like fat tails. Yeah, and this fat tail is also the kind of signature of power law distribution. Yeah, so and the idea is that to show how well this tail fit into the model, and we will do it, and we will share these results just a little bit later. Okay, and now we are going closer to the topic of collaboration, because we were studying this, and we can look at the number of authors in publications. And as Tamara also said, we collected information about up to 8 authors, and that's why here you can see this distribution. And what is really surprising is that 66% of papers are written by single authors. So there is no collaboration in these papers, and if we talk about scientific collaboration, then we take into account this 34% of articles which are written by 2, 3, 4, and so on authors. And of course, the most popular format of writing an article is writing in diets, and there are 25% of articles written in by 2 authors. And next we have triads, and these are just 7% of articles. So now think about your own experience, and probably you will also kind of remember that sometimes you and your colleagues are writing papers like together, but even in some cases it is necessary to have the papers written by single author. It's also our kind of culture. For example, for PhD dissertation, you need to have your personal articles written just by yourself. So that's why this is also kind of cultural thing that we notice. But what is interesting is that if we look at the number of authors in publication in dynamics, then we will notice really interesting changes. So here we see the temporal, the years of observations from 2010 to 2021. And then we have the shares of articles written by 1, this blue line, 2, this orange line, 3, green line, and so on, up to 8 authors. And what is really interesting to see is that there is a high decrease in the share of individual papers, from 80%, actually 81%, to 52% in 2021. So in 12 years, it just dropped down for almost 30%. And we really find it significant and interesting observation. Then we see the increase in the share of articles written by 2, 3, 4, and actually 5 and 6 and so on people. So for 2, we have an increase from 15% to 32%. And for 3, we have increase from 3% to 11%, and so on. Actually, we really see this increase for all the number of authors, and it really shows us that there is a trend for collaboration, and there are more articles which are published in by the groups of authors, even not just pairs of authors, but 3, 4, and 5, and so on people. So it can also mean that there is a kind of change in the culture of publishing sociological literature, and also by the fact that there are some kind of incomers of some researchers, new researchers coming from different disciplines, and they can also have their own culture of publications. So this is about the temporal distribution of a number of authors. And now let's look at the number of co-authors in collaboration network. Again, interesting things that just exactly 1/3 of our authors who were included in the dataset do not have any co-authors. So they just publish their papers by themselves. And most authors have just one, 2 or 3 co-authors, so which come up to almost 50%. So we have 31% of authors who have just one co-author, and then 14% who has 2 co-authors, and so on. And I especially left here this table to show that there are some few authors who really has quite a high number of co-authors, which would be 140, 120, 112, 95, 85, and so on. And it's really interesting, especially taking into account the Dunbar number, which tells us that we can consider about 150 relations. And after this amount of people, we already have some problems to navigate these relationships. And yeah, these very productive authors, they somehow manage it, and these are really interesting examples. Again, I'll just look at the questions and answer. I think in the end. Okay. Okay. So, well, when we talk about collaboration, actually, in our data, we have just 34% of articles which are written in co-authorship, and probably not just, but just 2/3 of authors who at least have one co-author. Others, publications and authors written by single authors, and it's not a collaboration in a, let's say, strict sense. So we can count the input of the author to the field, but we can say that this is a collaboration because it's actually kind of collaboration with yourself. And now let's look at the collaborativeness index of authors, which we were able to count on our normalized this CN collaboration network. So this collaborativeness index show that the propensity of a particular author to publish it in text in co-authorship. So if it is high, then the author often publish papers in collaboration. If it is low, then the publications written in by the author himself or herself prevails. So what we can see at this picture, that actually these values of this index are skewed towards these small values like 0 and 0.1, and which means that most authors do not collaborate with others. And then we can observe 2 peaks in the values of 0.5 somewhere here, and then 0.6 or 0.7. And so these are the groups of authors who has quite average indicators, like 50% of collaborativeness. And then we have some high indices, however, they are rare, and we do not observe them a lot in our data set. So this was the observation on the level of on the macro level, and now let's just go deeper and look at the at some of the metrics that we mentioned at the micro level. And here I would start with the temporal distribution of the number of publications for the, let's say, most productive authors. So these are the authors who has 120 and more works published during these 12 years. And probably I should also comment on the names on the labels of our notes that we specially created during our pre-processing stage. So basically, the idea was, as already Tamara said, the idea of choosing eLibrary was that this is the database which allows us to use the IDs of authors as their indicators. For example, Web of Science doesn't allow to use such IDs because there are no such IDs in the data from Web of Science. And then we have a lot of problems with the authors disambiguation, like some names of authors can be merged into one, and sometimes we can split the same authors into kind of 2 people or 3 people, and they will somehow disappear in the data set. And in this case, it is nice to have an ID. And we were very happy that we are able, that we have the access to such data. But it turned out that the IDs of authors were not available for all the authors in our data set. There were some mistakes, or some authors were not registered, and so on and so forth. So we decided to deal with this problem of authors disambiguation in such a way that we created our own IDs. And they are created as following. So at first we have the ID of the author in eLibrary. So for example, for this first author, Samygin, this first number will be his own ID in eLibrary. And then we also added the IDs of affiliation of these authors, which allowed us to actually differentiate between authors who had the same surnames and so on. And so when you look at these labels, you can basically very fast understand who is the author. You can find him or her in eLibrary, and also you can check in which organization he or she works. And if there are several names, so it means that in our data set, the author was working in different affiliations. So there are different organizations which are affiliated to this author. So we see that there is this distribution, and this authors has written 120 more works, which actually means that they were writing about at least 10 papers per year. And now again, let's think about us, how productive we are. And we actually see that there are some authors who are really super productive, like this Samygin, who has 54, 52, and 40 publications in 2016, 2018. So this peak is well seen here on this picture. But when we compare the values of the number of papers written by authors to the input to the field that we can count, that we already have counted, then we can actually get different results, where other authors will pop up. So here on this slide, you can see the table of 50 most productive authors. And so in the first column, there would be their productivity, their total number, they would be their total contribution. So it's a little bit, so it's vice versa. So for the first column, it would be their total contribution to the field. Then on the second column, it would be their total number of works. And then there would be the index of collaborativeness. And these authors whom we have seen in the previous slides are marked in orange. And actually we see that this, for example, Sergei Samygin, who has 241 papers published, actually his contribution will be 84, which is less than 120 for Vladimir Ilyin, who has 142 publications, like 100 less publications than Samygin. And here we see that the index of collaborativeness for Sergei Samygin would be 65%. So it means that 65% of his works are written in collaboration, while for Vladimir Ilyin, this would be only 15% of papers. So this, I think this table, we can look at this table for quite some time, and just to find some names of very famous sociologists, and just to make some conclusions about their tendency to collaborate. And I would just, so this top 50 of authors was constructed according to, so we took 50 authors who had the largest amount of papers, and then we sorted this table according to their input to the field. And we can also use another approach, and we can look at the authors with highest contribution to the field, also top 50 authors here, and those authors whom we saw in the this temporal distribution slide are also marked here with these orange lines. So here we can see that for top 50 authors, this contribution to the field will vary from 50 and up to 120, even though some of these authors would not have a high number of publications. And actually what we can see when we observe this or previous picture is that we can definitely say that there are two opposite strategies which are used by the authors who are very active. So they can write a lot by themselves and they can have these low levels of collaborativeness, or they can have a lot of collaborators, a lot of co-authors, and this is how they get a lot of publications, and that's how they become super productive. And now let's go to the middle level, to the level of dyads, and actually not dyads, but small groups. And here we would like to show some of the results of network analysis exactly. So there would be some there are already some structures and pictures of graphs. And we will try to describe our network according to the subgroups to which it can, which it contains. So at first, let's talk about weak components in this collaboration network. So actually, for the whole network, main component would consist of 30% of nodes. So 30% of nodes of this network, they construct one huge component, and which means that all the nodes which are included into this subgroup, they are reachable. So you can go from one part of the other part of network, and there would not be any structural holes. And then, besides this main component, there are also more than 4,000 of components of the size from 2 to 113. And these are other 34% of nodes. And then, as we already told you, we have 36% of authors who doesn't have any collaborators. So, of course, they would be isolated. And we can try to detect some interesting groups in our networks that we constructed using different approaches. And at first we looked at the regular non-normalized CO co-authorship network, where the groups of authors, which shows us the groups of authors who have written with each other the largest number of publications. And we made a line cut at the level of 15. So we got the subgroups of authors. There were 144 authors who has at least 15 publications written together. And here we just show you some groups of these authors. So for example, these are the groups which has 5, 6, and 9 nodes. And for example, one of these structures, like star-like structure of Sergei Samygin, who is here in the middle, and we can see that he has quite a lot of publications written, for example, with this author who is surname is started with Vereshcha, so Vereshchagin or Vereshchagina. I'm not really, I can't say exactly, but there are 74 publications written between these two authors. So also we can look quite precisely into these structures, but what you can say is that in many cases these are so-called star-like structures, so that we have someone in the middle, or we have some group of authors. So they could be star-like or clique-like structures, so where we have one author who is kind of connecting everyone, or they could be a kind of clique where everyone is connected to everyone. And what is nice in our way of constructing labels, we can see if the authors are written or if the authors are working or were working in the same organization, because this end numbers would be the same for the authors who are written in the same organization. Okay, then this is the structure that we obtained when we made a line cut at the level of 30. So these are the authors who has at least 30 publications written together. And then the majority of our groups would disappear, and we would just have these pairs of authors who are collaborating a lot with each other, but still we have also some structures. It is more interesting to see at the results which are obtained by the analysis of this normalized CT prime network. So this is the network of strict collaboration, which means that here we take into account only the contribution of authors to the articles written jointly with other authors. So the contribution to their own articles is not taken into account. So this is kind of, this term of strict collaboration was proposed by Mark Newman, who actually proposed the idea that if we are talking about how people are collaborating with each other, then we should not take into account this collaboration with themselves, right? So this is quite logical. If we look at this group, so this is here we use to construct this network, we use a so-called fractional approach. So the contribution of authors for the article which is written by 3 people would be 1/3, and for the article written by 10 people would be 1/10, right? Because it is we just count that if so the article would weight 1, and then we just split this one according to the groups of authors who has written it. And this is a kind of more honest way to count the input of the authors to the article. And here we used the island approach, which was proposed by our scientific advisor, Professor Batagel. which allows us to find locally dominant groups of nodes with higher cohesion within the group than with the neighbors which are situated beyond the group. And PAEC allows us to find such structures. And so for this network, we found more than 700 islands in range of 5. So the minimum number of nodes was 5, and the maximum was 159. And then when we actually get these islands, then we should look at these structures, and there are different criteria according to which we can choose these islands. So we can choose them according to the size, so we can look at the largest islands. Or sometimes the islands which are the largest, they can have very low line weights. So then another approach would be to see to look at the islands with the highest line weights. Or we just can pick up some authors which are interesting for us, which are, for example, well-known sociologists, and we would just like to see in which groups they are located, and we can choose the islands according to some names. So we used 3 of these approaches, and now I will show you some of the structures that we obtained. So this is actually what we get if we look at the largest island. So this is the island which consists of 159 nodes. And so just notice this Sergei Samygin here in the middle. Yeah, and there is so he and his co-author with whom they have a lot of articles, this very Shcheglova, or I'm sorry for the colleagues. I just yeah, in the article I have written this surname, but now I just don't remember. And we see that also the line weights are shown here. Yeah, and we see that these authors actually constitute quite a large group of authors who are connected to each other. Then we have the group, the island for one of 120 nodes, and also here we would have this Rostovsky, who has also the extreme number of papers written, and we have also Morev, also who appeared as the author with the largest amount of publications. And also we see that they are somehow connected, and they are connected to many others who are also connected as a kind of tree. But as I said, there is a problem that these line weights can be not the highest. So that's why we were looking at the islands with the largest line weights. And what we did, actually, we looked at our network, then we made a line cut at some level, and we got 44 authors who has the highest values of lines. And then we were just searching for the islands for these authors, and we obtained this amount of islands. And it turned out that some of them has already appeared, so like this first island or second one. And here we show these islands which are shown in orange, this darker orange and lighter orange. And so this would be these islands 24, 29, and 68. And so now we see that we have this, for example, Zborovsky, who is very well-known author in sociology, and Ambarova, I'm sorry. And they are also connected with Irina Trotsuk and so on. So, so this is one group. And then we would have Maximov, Amelchenko, and some other authors who are very highly connected to each other. And here we have also another group, but we actually see that the most collaborating authors here are just 2 pairs, and others are just somehow slightly connected to them. And these are the other islands with largest line weights. And if we see, we can also find some well-known sociologists, and actually we can support our kind of empirical knowledge of this empirical data can support our knowledge about collaboration structures of some of the colleagues whom we know. Well, and then we were also looking at some subgroups, at some islands for the selected authors. And we were just looking for the authors who didn't appear before in this list of 50 most productive authors, and we just found the islands for them. And here are some structures that we obtained. Let's look. I think there are some. So this would be, for example, this on the left, this would be the group of the sociologists from the Institute of Sociology. So you see Gorshkov, Trofimov, Galenkova, Ignatiev, I don't know, Sheregi. So some well-known sociologists here, yeah, connected to each other. Then this is some other group, and yeah, here we would have one more group. Yeah, sorry, it's not really easy every time to pick up a well-known sociologist here. And for example, here we would specify that we have the group of Dmitry Rogozin, who is also quite a well-known sociologist, also with Timur Osmanov. Yeah, so this is a group, and then this would be the group of Sergei Kravchenko. So this might be from Moscow State University, and so on, and yeah, some other groups. But always there is at least one sociologist who appeared in our table of the most productive sociologists because he has a high input to the field. And then, I'm ready also to show you some results of the global structure analysis. And this is as Tamara said, we are trying to use block modeling approach to analyze our networks. And previously in May, when we were showing some results to our lab members and also to our scientific advisors, we actually were not really, we didn't succeed so much in the block modeling, but it looks like now it works better. So what we did, unfortunately for block modeling, we need to somehow reduce the network. So it's impossible to analyze this network of 37,000 of nodes for this approach, because it's it just takes so much computational costs, so it would not be possible. And that's why the idea is that at first we need to somehow reduce our network and then to make a procedure of block modeling on it. So we extracted main component of our network, CT prime, so which is normalized, and we got 11,500 of nodes. And then we use the approach of PS cores, which allows us to actually leave only the nodes with some certain weight and number of neighbors. And we selected the threshold of 6, and we got about 400 nodes. And in this group of 400 nodes, again, we extracted main component and we got 214 nodes. And then we already used this extracted subnetwork, yeah, like the structure of the most collaborating authors who has the highest values also of collaboration. So we used this for block modeling approach, and we used this approach of corrected Euclidean dissimilarity. And looks like we got 3 clusters, which you can see here. And basically, these are the groups of authors who are collaborating with themselves, but they're not really collaborating a lot with each other, except for this large group, this, let's say, third cluster, the largest one, which consists of like maximum 2 like pairs of authors, but they are also collaborating with some other nodes, authors. I think that this, and also here we used the binarized data, so we didn't take into account the values of lines, but I think that we should proceed with this analysis, and so this would be actually one of the directions to the further analysis. So we would like to see this global structure of the sociologists whom we analyze, and also to see how this structure changes through time. So we know there are some studies like this, and we would really like to do something like that as well. And finally, I would like to show you this, some results which shows the dynamics of the networks, of the network development. So at first, we counted some global network measures for the whole network, so which is from 2010 to 2021. And again, here we have 37,000 of nodes, even though some of them are isolates, but according to our way of network construction, so we include all the authors into our network. And then we just kind of clean it. And the line weights in this network varies from 0.03 to 63.5. So this is a high distribution of the line values. And we also counted density and average degree and largest distance, average distance, clustering coefficient, and also the largest component. As I said, it is 30.5% of the network. So which means that there are 11.5 thousand of nodes, which appears in the largest component. And also we counted the number of weak components that we can get, and also the number of islands. So these numbers I already was mentioning them, and they're shown here on the slide. But if we split our network into 4 periods, because we had 12 years of observations, so we decided to split it into 4 periods of 3 years of observations. So then we can also notice some changes through time. So basically what we see is that through time the amount of nodes is growing, except for the last period. And sure, the number of edges, number of connections between these vertices is also growing, and also the line weights, the upper, the higher level of line weight also is decreasing. So you see from 11 to 15, 28, then slightly decreases 27, but in total this would be 63. Then we can also look at the density. However, it doesn't tell us much, because this is actually a sparse network, a huge network, and there is a tendency that the density is decreasing with the growth of the network. So nothing surprising. Then we have average degree, and we can also see that the average degree is growing through time. Largest distance, it is also increasing because the network is growing, and the largest component is becoming larger, as you can see here. So in 2010, 2012, it was just largest component was less than 1% of the whole network. So just 97 nodes could be put into one largest component, and all the other nodes were split into smaller components. And then they were already about 700 in next period, and then 3,000, and then 2020, 2,220 in the last period. And what is interesting? What else is interesting? That also the average distance has grown, also because the largest distance has grown. And the number of weak components was growing till the third period, and also the number of islands. We can see that it was growing. It was 185, and then it became 383. So then it would be nice to show the distributions of these weak components, number of weak components, and also number of islands, but we haven't prepared it so far, and we will do it in our next presentations. But I think that this table really shows the differences which took place in our network, so that it was developing. And as I said, there is a decrease of number of publications and somehow authors in the last period. So that's why it's quite logical that some of the characteristics decreased as well. So now we can come up with some conclusions. There are few of them, and I think that according to the material that we have covered, we can even talk about much more conclusions. But now let's just say that, there is a trend towards increase of collaboration. We have seen that the number of articles which are written by 2, 3, 4 people, authors, is decreasing, and we have seen this drop of the articles which are written by single authors. And we have seen that there is a small number of authors which can be called as super productive authors, and they have a high scientific activity and productivity. And these are just about 6% of scientists who published more than 10 articles in this period. And there are different strategies how they maintain this high level of high number of publications. They can have, they can tend to collaborate, or they can really write the majority of articles by themselves, just being so productive. And we distinguished many separate groups which varies in size in our collaboration network. And probably I didn't say it precisely, but sometimes we can see that these are the authors who are working in the same organization, as we can see the tails of their labels. But there are also some situations when authors collaborate when authors from different organizations collaborate with each other. And it looks like this collaboration network follow the small world model, this preferential attachment, as also we noticed that a third of the authors is included into weakly connected component, where all authors are reachable. And it's a nice kind of hypothesis to check with some mathematical mathematical tools, yeah, and to show how different or not different our distribution that we observe empirically from some theoretical models. And so this is actually what we are supposed to do in the future. Yeah, and I would like to announce the further presentation on the topic of bibliometric network analysis, which would be done next Monday by Irina Pavlova. And this would be devoted to the comparison of software for the analysis of large information networks, which would be again done on the case of bibliographic data. And Irina is going to cover such softwares as R, Python, Orange, Payek, Gephi, VOS Viewer, and the title of VOS Viewer is not correctly written here, I just noticed it. Yeah, so it looks like it's also going to be very interesting. And this goes in the stream of this methodological development of the tools for the analysis of Russian data, which we are really working on. And the approach that we proposed for the analysis of eLibrary data based on this case study of Russian sociologists is now under registration of intellectual, how to say, read. So this is, we are going to register it as a result of our intellectual activities, and we will be able to share it and to give all the links to our codes that we implemented. And also we have a lot of other ideas, including creation of some special packages for Russian bibliometric network analysis. So yeah, besides this substantial research questions, we are very much interested in the development of methodology. And if some of you is also interested in some of these questions, so we would be really happy to collaborate and to work together. And of course, we are writing publications on the project, and they are in progress. And we always write about our publications on our website and also in our channels, in Telegram, and also in Contact. So just stay tuned, and you will be in touch with. You will be able to see our progress on these projects. So thank you very much. I think now I'm ready to, and me and Tamara would be really happy to get some feedback from you, some questions or some comments. Yeah, so this is the work in progress, and it will be important to think about some ideas right now until it is already published. Okay, I noticed that there was a question. Wait. I noticed there was a question in the chat. There are two questions already. So Artyom was asking which topical fields are mostly responsible for this increase in collaboration. So actually, this would be just my kind of hypothesis. It would be nice to check. We also have the information on the topics of the publications, keywords. And it means that we can actually check if the topics are changing during the time. And we can actually try, we can check if we see some new kind of some influence of some disciplines according to this analysis of topics. But as we already know from the analysis of the field of social network analysis, when physicists came has come to the field of network analysis. So network science appeared in 2000s. Actually, then the structure of collaboration also changed a lot, because it's very natural in physics and or in some other natural sciences to have not one author in the paper, because there are some labs working together, creating something, and it is a culture that you include all the people who are working on the project into the paper. Okay, we have 2 hands, so it's really nice, and please, Alina or Lilia, who was the first, you can ask a question.
Okay, thank you. I'm terribly sorry for being without video, but
or Julia, I'm sorry, Julia.
Yes, I'm
Right?
Julia,
Yeah,
and
sorry.
I'm terribly sorry for not switching on my camera, but it doesn't want to collaborate, and I can't fix it right now. I'm terribly sorry. I have one comment and one question, if you don't mind. My comment is about the statement you made during the brief theoretical background, when it was I think it was Tamara who said that during the decade between the 1960s and 1970s, the Soviet sociology was kind of isolated from foreign theories and research, and I don't agree. I think it's a bit too much because during Soviet period, Soviet scientists were familiar with foreign theories, Western theories, in the form of criticism of bourgeois sociology, and it was like a special genre. The whole institute, which you maybe know, called the Union in Russian, existed just for that. They published special journals which reviewed foreign theories. So it's a bit too much, you know, this statement. And also Soviet sociologists encountered Western theories via Eastern European authors, like Polish sociologists, for example. So like the situation was a bit more complicated. And I just think that during review, for example, it can be an issue. And my question will be about the last part of your title title of your presentation. The last part is about. Was about maybe it's about your project. I'm sorry. Yeah, possible growth points. Could you please clarify what it means and what? because it's really interesting. We usually use growth points talking about business, and it's just I would like to understand what it means. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you very much, Julia. It's really nice to get the feedback and from the person who really knows, who is really in the topic. I will start from the question and also make some answer to the comment. So the possible growth points is translated from Russian возможные точки роста. So the idea was that if we look at the structure and then we will see that there are some, from the structural point of view, we can look that there are some kind of, let's say, structural holes or some problems that exist in the network. So like some parts which are not connected to each other and so on. And the idea was that we can we can make this structural overview and then to make some ideas about what can be changed so that the community will somehow collaborate more. And you see that the project was, so also one of the ideas was that we have the kind of hypothesis that in general, the Russian sociological community is not very well presented in the international sphere, international sociology. And we were thinking that we can make some also advices, like what should be done so that this collaboration with foreign scientists will increase and so on. And the project was written in 2021, and then 2022 year came, and now of course we see that it's now very difficult to talk about collaboration, and at the same time we think that it would be really interesting and important to collect data like in 2 years and to see what is changing and how it is changing and so on. We also have another part of this whole topic development where we analyze the data of Russian sociologists from Web of Science, like this international area. And it would be also interesting to see. So now we would like to compare what we have if there are papers which are written in this international database and in Russian database. But we think that it would be really interesting to see a little bit later how the patterns are changing. Would there be any more collaboration, less collaboration with each other, and so on? Yeah, so we had this positivist ideas about that our analysis can help us to find some problems and there can be some changes done so that the situation can be changed. And talking about your comment, yes, thank you very much. Of course, I think that it's just not enough one slide to talk about the situation with Soviet and Russian sociology, and probably we were not really so careful about our words that we have written. But yes, of course, we cannot say that the sociologists were just extremely isolated and didn't have any connections, even though these connections were through criticism. But it's actually also an interesting way how this communication can be done, and I think it is it is a good case anyway of collaboration, because the papers were translated, and actually even some foreign sociologists were visiting Soviet sociologists, and Soviet sociologists were also going to some international business trips. So actually, yes, we cannot say that there was they were just completely isolated. Yes, so we will be more careful about in talking about it, because yes, it is really important also to make this idea clear for the reviewers and also our readers. Okay, so I thought yeah, thank you so much, thank you. Now let's ask Alina your question, because others are already written.
Yeah, thank you. It's a great research. My congratulations. Looks extremely cool. So I have, of course, a bunch of questions. I just like struggling to select which one to ask. But well, I start with the first one, and then if like time allows us, I will ask another one. So in your research, you are presented that, well, at least in Russian sociology, social sciences, collaborations doesn't mean that author is more or less like productive, because like you say that there is two strategies and some people are writing on themselves. So I just wondering, this existence of these islands, of these really like strong groups, strongly connected scholars, in which way they're actually influencing the success of scientists. Because again, in the table that was like Professor Ilyin, who had like just 15% of papers in collaboration, and still he's like the most influential author. So do you have any results, any hypotheses, or some maybe something like this about how this island, the role of the island for the science?
Wow, this is really something to think about. How the structure of these authors really matters in sense of their productivity. And actually, this is something that we are going also to analyze in future with network modeling. So now we are thinking about using the methodology of ERGM and TORGM into this data set. And it would be interesting to see how the some network characteristics influence the changes in the network. And as for talking about this, something that we observe now, it looks like some authors, they are just writing a lot of papers by themselves, and they, I'm not sure, yeah, Ilyin is in, so I think he has his group. And there are some authors from this table, this top 50 authors, who even do not form any island. So they just writing papers by themselves. And as for Ilyin, I think that he appeared in the structure and he also has his group, but basically the majority of his articles are written in collaboration, not in collaboration, but by himself. But for example, as I was comparing it with Samygin, and the majority of his publications are written with somebody else. And probably we can, I don't know, we can probably somehow count the number of collaborators that the person has, and also make some, I don't know, statistical analysis out of this data. So Alina, thank you so much. This is a question to think about.
Okay, is it possible to have another question?
Yeah, sure. More questions,
okay.
Better. Yeah.
So another really interesting like issue in your data is this amount of people who wrote just one paper or just no collaborated at all. So this is quite surprising, like no collaboration at all. It's a little bit strange. So I'm wondering, could it be like that we can see this pattern is just the consequence of the data collection algorithm? Because as far as I understand, you collected papers based on like this thematic rubric shown on the page of the paper. And before this year, there's like two thematic like topics, two fields of science mentioned for each paper. It was the guarantee and like just a thematic. And starting from this year, just like OECD. So basically, what is my idea? So if you collected papers and, for example, you got the ID of the author, but haven't collected papers of the, like all the papers of these authors, there could be a story like this, that the author got a paper which was classified as social sciences, but all other papers are actually can be classified as like political science or some other like field. So like the data collection, after you collected all of this list of authors, have you got all of the papers they published?
Yes, Alina, it is a great question because actually it was our idea. Actually, not only idea, okay, let me tell from the beginning. So at first we collected, so at first we were making some consultations with the people from eLibrary because we were getting this data under the contract, and they were providing us the list of the IDs of publications which suits our search query. And we just said that we need scientific articles, of sociology. Actually, we were discussing different ways how this data can be collected, and we come up with them to this strategy, which is shown on the slide, that these are the scientific articles from the journals which are indexed in Russian Science Citation Index, which are written by the authors who are marked as Russian, and the subject area is sociology. And you are exactly right that for some authors, they can be other publications which are marked as other subject areas. So I, of course, when I got the data, I was searching for myself, and I found some articles of mine in Russian, but I didn't find my articles in Scientometrics journal, for example, because it is attached to the subject area of I don't remember how exactly, but like scientometrics or information science, but not sociology. So that's how we didn't include these articles. And then the idea was that we take all the IDs of the authors who appeared in this data set, and then we collect their publications for all their publications. And actually we did this, but then we got also some substantive questions about, like, should we include these authors or we should not? And we were discussing it again with the library, and somehow we come up with the decision not to include them. But actually we even have this data. And yes, I think that the further analysis should somehow deal with this data as well. But now we worked with the methodology, and it will be much easier to proceed this data. And yes, so this is a limitation of the study. And strictly speaking, we can have some, we should check some of these trends that we observe with some other strategy of data collection. But we are doing it as we are analyzing also the data from Web of Science, and also we will see what we will get there. Okay. But I'm really happy that we had the same idea of how to how to get extra data. Yeah. Okay. So Alina, you are done?
Yeah, I suppose yes, because there is another question for you waiting in the chat.
Okay, there are two more questions. of Olga, do you think the culture of single-authored papers exists only in the field of Russian social sciences or in Russian science in general? Actually, I think this culture of single-authored papers exists just not only in Russia, and we do have some examples of the studies which are also done, for example, by our colleagues from Slovenia, and they were analyzing the whole national science in Slovenia, and they also saw that in some disciplines these single-authored papers are they just they appear more often than in others. And but I think that the share of this of such papers was not as high as we saw in our case. Yeah, so actually it would be nice also for the literature review to make some observations of some yeah, to look at the at other research and to see what are the patterns in general in our disciplines. So yeah, thank you very much for this comment. I think it is important to have in the paper. And also, I just had a look at Artyom's comment. Also, it was observed that mostly positivist research is done collaboratively, while qualitative studies are mostly individually published. I have a link for this paper. So Artyom, if you have a link to this paper, so I will be really happy if you send it to me. And I also, I think I heard this idea, but I didn't search for some of the research supporting this. But yes, it also, I think that, yeah, actually, Tamara, I think we were making some citation in some of the previous papers that collaboration increases when the paper is devoted to some quantitative analysis. Yeah, I think so. And probably, yes, it can also be a kind of a sign of a shift towards the more quantitatively oriented research than qualitatively. So, but we should check it also with the topics and keywords. Okay, again from Julia. Is it possible to take into account the position of an author in academic hierarchy? Is it possible that the ones who have a group of collaborators are the ones who occupy a high position in organizational hierarchy? Basically, yes. We have so this would be the attributes of the actors, and it's quite easy to attach this information to the network information on graph. We just would need to somehow collect this information. We have the information on the affiliation where the person is working, but we do not have the information on their position. But probably for some substructures, for example, for these islands, it would be interesting and important to look at the positions of the authors in the hierarchy. We have implemented an analysis of the data which was collected by Mikhail Sokolov for the local community of St. Petersburg sociologists. And they provided us this data, and we were trying to analyze it with the block modeling approach, because they were using a different methodology, and we were comparing which groups they obtained and which groups we will obtain using our this block modeling approach. And there we had the information on the positions of the authors, and what we found was really interesting, that there was one person who was connected, and there the question was, so it was the public, it was the survey, and the question was that like, tell me who influenced on your career, like invited you to conferences, invited you to publish papers in some journals, invited you to some positions at work, and so on. So there were, I think, 5 or 6 questions. And there was one person who was really extremely connected to everyone. And then it just turned out that he is the dean of the faculty, and he really has a very high position. So that's why he really influenced everyone. And it was seen from the structural point of view, because it was seen that he has this unique position. He formed a separate group by himself. And probably it would be, as we have a lot of data, probably it would be nice to find some structures at first, and then to try to explain them using this extra data on the attributes of the authors. So yeah, it's a great idea, and especially in block modeling, it would be really nice to see yeah, how it influences. Okay, then we have Moody. Okay, yeah, I know this paper, but I didn't remember the fact about the quantitative and qualitative research. Okay, and also Artyom is writing, then in relation to the fact I mentioned, it would be interesting to see whether the topics became mostly positivist qualitative, hence increased collaboration can be explained by quantification of Russian sociology with following neo-Marxist conclusions that just firstly pop in head. Great, Artyom, if you are interested in this research, so you are very welcome to join us, and yeah, we can think about it together as well, because this analysis of topics is something else, but we are very ready to also make this analysis of topics that we are observing. But also it is important to take into account the comment of Alina, and to think about the best strategies to get data for some disciplinary areas in eLibrary, because if we are going to analyze some other disciplinary areas, so then we should understand how to get data and what should be the best strategies to get data. Okay, now I see that it looks like the questions are over, and oh yes, almost 2 hours are also over. So I think we should stop. And so, dear colleagues, thank you very much for this great seminar. It was really so much important and interesting for us. And I think, Tamara, I think we got a lot of really great ideas and very important feedback. So, dear colleagues, we invite you to our further seminars and just all the events that we held in the lab. So, yeah, please come and join us. Yeah, thank you very much. So now I think I will stop the recording.